A note for the audience. This chapter is recorded with a door open to the outside. My dog is not cooperating today, so it was either record with the door open, and so you will occasionally hear ambient sounds in the background. Hopefully it won't be too distracting, or not record at all. So here we are. Ambient sound brought to you by Cadence the Hound Dog. How Eamon Met Kaidan. Chapter 6. Abandoned Prison East March. Turdas, the 23rd of Evening Star, in the 201st year of the 4th era. Emelia. Emelia began to wonder what time it was. She couldn't even be sure what day it was. She had left Greywatch House to confirm Thalmor occupation of a ruined fort on the coast south of Winterhold. She had left on morndusk just after first light. Eamon had been out all night to assist an overwhelmed midwife, and he had not returned by the time she woke up. She thought at the time that this was a push from the gods. They were giving her a chance to pursue this lead without Eamon having to know about it. Emelia smothered a bitter laugh. Oh, idiot. She had mounted her sweet mare Petunia and taken off just as the sun was threatening to crest the horizon. She had been taken by the Thalmor sometime around midday, and since then she had not seen the sun or heard anyone mention the time or date. She felt sure she had not been here as long as a week. They'd not fed her, and she'd only had one chance to drink water, but she was not dying or severely weakened, so it couldn't have been more than a few days. Surely not. As she was considering all of this, Kaidan returned. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding and took in the sight of him. He had managed to remove most of the dried blood from his body, and she could finally get a clear look. His damp hair was pushed back out of his face, and he was standing at his full height for the first time in her presence. He looked huge, to be honest, and strong. His skin was actually a warm brown and much darker than her own. This man is not a Nord, she thought, but he was far too large to be anything else. A man of mixed heritage, maybe. It wasn't important. The important things were that he had bathed off the blood as she asked, he had returned instead of leaving her here, and he no longer looked like he was in danger of falling over dead. On the contrary, he looked like a steel giant who could pull the building down around them if he took it to mind. Kaidan softly cleared his throat, and she moved her gaze to meet his. "I found food," he said. He handed her an apple and a hunk of bread that didn't look too worse for wear. She looked up at him, astonished. "Eat up," Kaidan said. "I had a look around before I washed myself, and there was a supply room with only one guard. They had weapons in there, and they had a little food." She took a bite of the bread, and her hands began to shake as ravenous hunger took over. "Go slowly," Kaidan warned. "Force yourself to eat small bites and chew it." Emelia nodded and swallowed down the mad urge to shove all of it into her mouth at once. As she chewed, Kaidan placed a pair of leather boots at her feet. "Took these off the guard," he said. "He was small for a man, but they're probably still too big for you. I figure it's better than going barefoot, especially when we get outside." She noticed that Kaidan was wearing boots, too. "I thought you said there was only one guard." "These were on a shelf," he explained. "There were actually a lot of boots in there, but no other armor pieces. I also found a sword, and two of these." He set a small steel dagger next to her boots. "I didn't know if you'd use it, or—" He trailed off. "Thank you," Emelia said, and then she used the dagger to cut her apple into manageable pieces. He stood there watching her chew, and curiosity got the better of her. "I thought you were a Nord at first, but you're not, are you?" she asked. "No," he said. "At least, I don't think I am. Maybe in part. It's hard to say." This got her attention. "You don't know your own race?" He shook his head and explained that he'd never been told where he came from or who his parents were. Emelia changed the subject, saying, "The Thalmor took me because I found one of their unauthorized operations in Winterhold, and they caught me stealing documents from a justicier's desk." Kaidan didn't react to this. "What I'm wondering," she continued, "is why they took you and how we ended up in the same place." "My sword," he said. "Your sword?" "Yes. They arrested me because they wanted my sword." "Must be one hell of a sword." "I don't know how special it is," Kaidan said, "but they kept asking about it. If it's important to them, they shouldn't have it. That much I do know." "Then let's go get it back." Emelia finished her last bite of apple and stood up. "But first, I need to have a last look at you, to make sure I didn't miss any internal bleeding or broken parts." Kaidan agreed, and Emelia walked in a slow circle around him, looking for wounds and cataloging scars. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Do you have any pain?" "My right leg is a bit stiff, but no, nothing else hurts." Emelia gently took his wrist, spoke the words of light, and pushed a thin restoration flow. She felt no resistance and discovered no new damage. She circled him again, examining as if she were inspecting a horse for purchase. "May I touch you?" she asked, not wanting to assume his permission like she'd done with the blood. He stiffened and paused briefly before nodding his consent. Emelia lifted his arms, smoothed her fingers over his armpits, pressed thumbs into joints and all along his upper spine. She ran a hand over his abdominal scars, prodded at his side, and pushed magic pulses here and there. She lost herself in the work, running through the checklists she'd learned from Eamon and her college masters. Kaidan allowed all of this without moving or pulling away. At length she was satisfied, and aside from a sore spot on his right thigh and scar tissue that was only visible if you knew where to look, his body seemed perfectly sound. "You'll do," she said. "Let's go." "What about you?" he asked. "Are you okay? With magic, I mean. Are you topped up on your magic?" The corner of Emelia's mouth turned up, but she did not laugh at him. He was being careful with her. She appreciated that, especially after her breakdown over the bathwater. "Something like that," she replied. "I have recovered enough." To demonstrate, she spoke the words of wind and produced a whirling ball of ice in one palm. Her other hand opened to a writhing red orb. "What is that?" Kaidan asked, pointing at the angry red ball in her palm. Emelia's face went rigid, and she replied grimly, "It is the illusion of fear." His eyes widened a bit. "They will know terror, Kaidan. I insist upon it." He didn't argue. She appreciated that, too.